So in your research, what you did was you looked at lots of papers that explored how to build better managers. Are there any key insights that you can share about the things that have worked in the past?
Yeah, I can. So, last week, again, building on what we talked about, I outlined a study by Peterson and Luffens, which was looking at the impact of manager recognition as just one capability on business outcomes, including profit, customer satisfaction, and retention. So, if you're interested in that research, you can go back and listen to what we talked about last week. But as part of that, what these researchers did was they provided training to managers in terms of social recognition and feedback, so how to deliver that better to their people. And the way that they did that was in a number of ways that kind of built on the sort of the process and the training that they administered to them. So what they did was they started off with involving managers in a discussion about the principles of the topics, the relevant models, the theory, I suppose, behind recognition, why it's important. And they did that in no longer than 3 hours. So not a huge amount of information in the sense that, it didn't have to go on for long periods of time. They recognize that managers are busy and that they don't have, days or weeks to dedicate all in one go. So they did it for no longer than 3 hours. But then they had the opportunity to practice these behaviors. And they did that via role play, which of course is a known sort of successful technique of practicing a behavior. We also know in other
albeit
research,
ghastly for everyone involved.
well, it is. It works, unfortunately, because we do have other research showing that compared with sort of more traditional classroom-based learning, if we imagine sort of lecture style perhaps learning, role-playing exercise can boost knowledge retention up to about 45%. So the difference is
because they're actively
huge.
practicing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you retain the information much better. And so having given managers the opportunity to practice, they then sent them away with lots of practical tips on how they can implement what they learned into sort of their real life job. So things like, how do you chart the frequency of performance behaviors in an accurate way that then allows you to keep track of what your people are doing and therefore, able to later down the line recognize those behaviors as good, and to apply the appropriate sort of social recognition, which is what, of course, they were hoping that they would do. Or even how do you summarize team performance in a way that recognizes sort of specific and critical behaviors in the team that have contributed to success, so people know what to continue doing more of in order to get better. So lots of practical things. And then the researchers themselves had frequent check-ins with the managers. So they either did that through phone calls or through emails, but essentially to try and probe them with questions as to whether they had remembered to do what they said they were going to do, and that they were implementing the training that they received as well. So all of these things together meant that managers came out of that whole sort of training exercise over quite a period of time. It was about 9 months all in that they sort of kept up with the prompts and kept up with that sort of nudging behavior. But by the end of that period, as we discussed last week, we saw huge benefits to the business in terms of increases in profit and improvements in customer satisfaction and also retention as well. So I think really it's these sorts of studies that we've looked at have kind of shown quite a sort of, I guess, there's a big overview of it's not just about sitting people down and telling them what they need to be doing. It's actually about sort of working with them, guiding them, giving them tips, helping them practice, and then checking in and not just leaving them to sort of get on with it, but making sure they're keeping up with what they said they'd do.
I think that checking in piece is really interesting because I think a lot of the time leadership and management development is approached through kind of one-off interventions at one point in the year. And then it's kind of, well, you're trained now. You can go off and you've got everything you need to succeed. And then people are surprised when behavior doesn't change. I think the other thing that's interesting that you said, just picking up on Ross's point about role-playing being ghastly, is that I wonder if that, like the fact that everybody feels slightly uncomfortable, I wonder if that's actually a useful
feature,
discomfort. yeah. Because like some of the sort of tasks involved with management are probably going to be quite uncomfortable, particularly if you're new to them. And I think maybe having experienced that discomfort in a kind of quote unquote safe environment is actually useful when it comes to applying these things in practice.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's no one listening to this just now who is maybe on the edge of their seat waiting for Anna to tell us what good training, effective research-based training looks like. I can't wait, Anna. You're finally going to tell us after all these years. It's the kind of things we probably would have guessed. some stimulus up front, opportunities to practice, some sort of commitment to actually implementing that thing, and then some sort of check on whether you actually did that. We're going to come back to this in a little while for some of the design decisions that we've made on some of our products. But I actually found this one of the most frustrating parts of your report, Anna, because I always hear at conferences and people post on LinkedIn about people wasting money on training. And we actually have ample evidence that management development works. I think the gap that we have is it's often difficult to connect that to business outcomes. But if we look at managers who receive training early in their careers, from your research, are more likely to have more people reporting to them later on, which is like a proxy measure for how senior they are.
Yeah.
And then, like I said at the start, they're more likely to have demonstrated those behaviors that we know make a difference to both team performance and then organizational performance. So the stuff like coaching and goal setting and identifying opportunities for others. So it's this stuff actually does work, and there's evidence for it. And then there is a tendency within the L&D profession to run ourselves down as if it doesn't work.
For sure. And I don't think we as researchers necessarily check this enough. I think we assume we're spending all this money, it'd be reasonable to hope that it is doing something, and often we just assume that it is. But I think just having that, it's just a bit of confidence. I think it's a nice thing to have checked in our own research and to just go, what, actually all the effort that we're going to is making a difference and can make a big difference, especially like we said, Ross, a lot of managers are not feeling supported at the beginning, and the research that we've done shows that if you do support them at the beginning with things like coaching and goal setting and the sorts of capabilities that they're really going to need, then further down the line they are far more confident in these areas. But not only confident, also doing them in the right sorts of ways and according to kind of best practice, I suppose.